Hi, everyone. Thanks for all of you who are joining us. We have a few more folks who are joining that we're letting in from the waiting room, but I'm going to share my screen in the meantime, and we will go ahead and get started. So if you're here today, you are here for the Registering in Ag Apprenticeship program. I think everyone should be able to see my screen right now. Great. So my name is Leah Ricci. I am the new Agrarian Program Director at Quivira Coalition. We are an apprenticeship program that is not registered, so I'm really looking forward to hearing from our panelists today about their experience with registering their own programs. So just a quick tech overview. Everyone is probably more than familiar enough with Zoom that you're sick of this by now, but just in case, if you're calling in from a phone, you can mute or unmute yourself by using *6. Otherwise, there's a little microphone in the bottom left of your Zoom screen. Ask that folks keep themselves muted just to minimize background noise unless you're speaking. There's a chat box that you can use to send questions at any point throughout the presentation. So just to try that out, if everyone who's joining us today, if you want to click on the chat box and type in your name and where you're joining from and something that you're looking forward to on the presentation today. And then if you click on participants, there's a way you can raise your hand. So if at some point during the presentation, I think we'll have a small enough group where if instead of typing a question into the chat box, you want to just raise your hand and unmute yourself and ask the question, we can do that. And we are going to go through some slides just in the beginning to introduce the panelists and the programs that they're representing. But then after introductions, we'll just move into some Q&A discussion. And so when we're doing that, in the top right of the Zoom screen, you can toggle back and forth between gallery view if you want to see everyone who's in the room, or presenter view if you just want to see the one camera for the person who's speaking. And we are recording this session, so if you need to leave early, you'll be able to find the recording on the conference platform. And just thanks for everyone's patience in dealing with different internet speeds. And just some basic communication and group expectations. Everyone who's here on the call today has something to share. And we're all here to learn, including the panelists. So, ask everyone to, honor folks' experiences and questions and listen with respect. If you are asking a question or have something to share, try to keep it on topic. And again, keep yourself muted unless you're talking. And just a brief thank you to the field school sponsors for the conference this year. So that is Farm Credit. And if you're not familiar with the Field Network is a national network of farm incubator and apprenticeship training programs. So check out those two websites, join the listservs. The groups exist to share best resources and to really allow beginning farmer and rancher training programs to network and connect with one another and share best practices. All right, so just to start things out, two of our panelists, and I guess I realize now going through this that our two panelists, your introductions are coming after this basic intro. So if you want to just say your name and what organization you're from, and then when we get to your organization, you can go into more detail about what you actually do there. But two of our panelists are going to give just a super brief overview of what are we even talking about on this panel today. What does it mean to register an apprenticeship program, and why are we talking about it?
So I'm Dan Dalton with Pasa Sustainable Agriculture in Pennsylvania. I help to run the Diversified Vegetable Apprenticeship, which is a state-registered apprenticeship for vegetable farm managers.
I'm Angie Sullivan. I'm the apprenticeship director at the Dairy Grazing Apprenticeship. We are a federally registered apprenticeship. We started out in the state of Wisconsin, registering with them. Then we brought on national partners, and that benefited us to register with the federal program then. So that's what we did.
As far as registering an apprenticeship, there are lots of different motivations for doing a formal registration, whether at the state or the federal level. Some of them are listed here. Lending your program additional credibility and recognition at the state level. It does open up opportunities for funding, both state and federal. And sometimes there are situations where an apprenticeship might benefit from one or the other, or maybe even being both. So as a, for instance, dairy grazing apprenticeship was federal, and we administer that in Pennsylvania. But then we found that there were actually state pools of money that benefited from us re-registering it in our state at the state level. So it exists with a state registration and a federal registration. So we're able to access both pools of monies. And then we have recognition by the various federal and state departments of labor or labor and industry, or however your states are arranged. So those recognitions are helpful for a variety of reasons that I think we'll get into a little bit later.
Yes, and similarly, dairy grazing apprenticeship also, as I said, started in Wisconsin, went federally, and now we're going back to registering with the state of Wisconsin for the same reason that Dan just mentioned. There are some funding opportunities through our state Department of Workforce Development. And so our farmers will have the option to be dually registered so that we can take advantage of some of those programs. So those are just some of the differences. And of course, each state has its own quirks when you're registered with them. So just be sure and check out kind of what the requirements are between federal and state, and to help you determine if it's worth registering with both.
Great.
So we were asked to give a definition for formal or registered apprenticeship. So that's next slide. And actually, if you want to advance one more, I've highlighted here and pulled out sort of the core elements to make it a little bit easier to scan. So it was 2 paragraphs. But it's a program of work-based learning. It is work-based in all its senses, and looking to prepare workers for a skilled trade. Apprentices receive paid on-the-job training, which is typically referred to as OJT. Some states have little tweaks to that nomenclature, but typically it's on-the-job training, and that is paid, as well as related technical instruction, which should also be bolded. I'm not sure why that didn't pick up, but the related technical instruction is about 10%, 9 to 10% of the time, and those are more formal off the farm, or at least more structured learning opportunities. In some programs and in some states, the related technical instruction is paid. In others, it is not. So that is one wrinkle from state to state and program to program. The programs are developed and registered in partnership between an industry sponsor and either the state or federal departments of labor and an education provider. In some cases, the industry sponsor is the education provider. In some cases, they're separate, and in some cases, there is a blend. You submit a work process schedule, which details the hours associated with the learning and the training to whichever Department of Labor you're working with. And all of the state programs are also registered with the federal Department of Labor for tracking and management purposes. Yeah, I think that pretty much captures it. Angie, I don't know if you have any other wrinkles that you want to highlight in there.
That pretty much covers it.
Great.
Thanks, Angie and Dan, for that intro. And if there's anyone in the audience, if there are clarifications that you want, or things that you are hoping we'll cover or talk about today, please put those into the chat. And if there are things that come up during the presentation today that are, sort of clarifying questions, we can stop and answer them as we go. And then we also have a number of discussion questions that we'll get to later, but would love to hear if there's anything in particular that folks in the audience want to hear about. So we have 5 panelists who we're going to hear from today, and I think one of the things that will be sort of interesting and exciting is to hear about sort of the variety and the differences between some of their programs, because as Dan and Angie mentioned, there are differences between registering apprenticeship programs in different states and different ways that programs are structured. So what we're going to do now is go through some slides to allow each of them to introduce themselves and their programs, and just share some of the basics of how their program, where they're located, how they're structured, who do they work with, how do they structure their related supplemental instruction, and what are the basic goals of their program before we then go into the Q&A. So first up, we have the Dairy Grazing Apprenticeship.
All right, thank you. So yeah, I apologize for how dense these slides are. I was trying to put a lot of information on here. The Dairy Grazing Apprenticeship started in 2010 and came out of an organization called Grassworks, which was a grazing organization here in Wisconsin. And we really, our mission is that we want to provide a guided pathway to dairy farm business ownership. We want to develop grazing careers and strengthen the economic and environmental well-being of rural communities and the dairy industry. As we all know, the dairy industry is in trouble, I would say, probably the easiest way to say it. The number of farms keeps shrinking, certainly here in Wisconsin. And we really see the dairy grazing apprenticeship as a viable option for people who are interested in being in the industry to get into the industry just a little bit easier, whether it's, you know, you apprentice on a farm and you end up, you know, getting equity by buying cows or taking over the farm in a farm succession. Really gives opportunities for our apprentices to have those options. We accomplished this mission by we link current and aspiring grazers in the transfer of farms and grazer skills and knowledge. We have a website that really manages our entire program. We have to obviously register our apprentices and our dairy, our master dairy grazers in a system for the federal and the state program. But we really have a website that manages our entire program. So we create the link so that these relationships can happen. We also develop alliances with agriculture, environmental, and consumer groups. We work with as many people as we can to partner, whether it's on grants or programming. And we like to provide opportunities for farmers and their customers to invest in the next generation. Many of our master dairy grazers, they really believe in the principles of grazing and have a strong desire to pass that on to others who have the desire to learn. Currently, we have 200 master dairy grazers in 14 states. Not all of them are paired with an apprentice. Some are just seeking an apprentice. Some have apprentices, and some just have become master dairy grazers in our program so that they have the opportunity to take on an apprentice. You can see the states here listed where we have administrative partners. We have 150 trained apprentices. Currently, we have 45 master dairy grazer and apprentice pairs. We've graduated 38 journey workers, and we have 180 apprenticeship candidates. Those are people who are interested in having an apprenticeship with a master dairy grazer, but have not been placed at this time. And DGA does not do the placement. Our master dairy grazers do all of their own hiring. And again, they do that all through our website. That's how they get connected with apprentice candidates. We have 8 administrative partners that work with us and connect us with farming networks in their state or region. They provide local outreach and they provide on-the-ground support to our master apprentice pairs. And one of our administrative partners is Pasa, Dan's group there. They're one of our administrative partners. Aaron DeLong is our education coordinator in Pennsylvania. And I see that one of our other education coordinators, Mary Ellen Franklin, is actually on this call, and she's our education coordinator in Vermont. And we would have a hard time doing this without those folks. They're very helpful. They know the farmers and the grazers in their states, and they help us make those connections. They help their master dairy grazers find appropriate apprentices, and they nurture those relationships, which is a big part of an apprenticeship. it really is like a dating game almost, trying to make these matches and finding ways to help personalities get along and make sure that the apprentices are doing, you know, what they need to be doing, making sure the master dairy grazers are inputting the on-the-job training hours. You know, it really is a constant job for our education coordinators to just stay on top of things and make sure things are running smoothly. And we really appreciate their participation. You can go to the next slide, Leah. So DGA was the first federally registered agricultural apprenticeship, and we registered federally in 2015. We have national standards for training in managed dairy production. We have on-farm work experience, just as Dan said, it's on-the-job training, it's related instruction. In 2018, DGA actually launched their own online school, the Managed Grazing Innovation Center. So we offer all of our related instruction classes online, and our online school is also open to the public. We were recently approved as one of the business management courses through the Farm Service Agency when people need to meet that requirement. So we do have people from the public that come in and take our classes also. We do have facilitated peer groups for our apprenticeships, social media groups just for our apprentices or for our master dairy grazers, a way for them to connect and network and discuss things that may be happening on each of their farms, maybe issues they're having or questions about how they do things. We see this as a pathway to farm ownership for apprentices if that's what they desire, or if nothing else, farm management. We do require 4,000 hours over 2 years. 3,700 of that is on-farm employment and training, and they are paid for that time. We require, I believe the federal rate has to be at least $8 an hour, and they get a 50-cent raise every 6 months. The majority of our master dairy grazers usually start much higher than that, somewhere in the $10, $11, $12 range. And then like I said, the apprentices get a 50-cent raise every 6 months. The remaining hours, 300 hours, is related instruction hours. So not only is that classroom work, but that's also in-person networking, pasture walks, discussion groups, webinars, that kind of thing, so that they can get their 300 hours. Anybody have any questions? Mary Ellen, if you have anything to add, feel free.
Okay, well, thanks for that intro, Angie. And then next up on our list of panelists is the Center for Land-Based Learning.
Great, thanks, Leah. Hi, everyone. I'm Marisa Alcorta. I'm the Apprenticeship Program Manager for the Center for Land-Based Learning. I'm going to start with actually reading the goal of our program. So we are trying to develop and retain skilled individuals for the occupation of a beginning farm and ranch manager. And we train in leadership and management, and we're trying to fill the gaps left by retiring farmers or employees. And I think what's important about our goal is that we are more focused on employment than farm ownership. Although if that's what our apprentices want to do, that's great, and a few of them have. And we're also trying to offer a service to farmers that benefits them and doesn't burden them. And one other thing I'll mention is that farmers can enroll current employees into our program, and that's actually helped us expand quite a bit. So some of the basics, we're located in Northern California, a little east of Sacramento in Woodland, which is surrounded by agriculture. And we started this as a pilot project in 2017 with 2 farms and 3 apprentices. And we registered with the state Division of Apprenticeship Standards in 2018. And over the last 4 years, we've graduated 5 apprentices, 2 of which are actually graduating today in just a few hours. And the 10 that we currently have enrolled have all actually joined our program in 2020. So it's pretty interesting. Our program is finally gaining quite a bit of momentum. It's taken a little while. And apprentices have to complete 3,000 hours of on-the-job training with us and a minimum of 250 hours of related supplemental instruction, like Angie explained. We're going to expand that to 450 hours here in the next year or so. And ours is a 2-year program, so 24 months. Thanks, Leah. Okay, and then in terms of who we work with, our farmers are pretty diverse. They range from very small scale urban farms, so 2 acres, to larger scale organic or conventional farms, up to 4,000 acres and even bigger. We think that having exposure to such a wide diversity of farms is actually really beneficial for our cohort of apprentices, so they can see all different types of operations. And the typical age range for our apprentices is between 22 and 35. We have so far we've had 60% men, 40% women, roughly, and 46% of our apprentices are from the Latinx community. And just quickly about our educational component, the coursework in our program is completely distinct from the on-the-job training part, and we try to keep it that way so that we prevent having more of a burden on the farmer. Most apprenticeships in California partner with the community college, which provides the coursework, and the state actually funds all of that. So apprentices don't pay for tuition or books or fees. And so we've partnered with a well-respected ag college in Southern California, actually, which is offering the basic ag science classes that are listed here. And we've also been working with an agricultural leadership organization to develop a leadership and management curriculum that all the apprentices will take together over 1 year as a cohort. And that actually came out of a survey that we did last fall, asking farmers statewide, what was important to them about an apprenticeship. So we're working on that. And then we're also developing a mentorship program that's going to be separate from the farm, although they will still have mentorship from their farm supervisor. We're hoping to develop something a little bit more in depth, where apprentices will be paired with a successful farmer from somewhere around the state for the 2 years that they're in the program, and hopefully it'll last beyond that too. But we were actually in transition this last year for our education components, so all of these things are going to be kind of launching in January of 2021.
Great, thanks, Marisa. So I'm just going to stop sharing my screen briefly for a moment, some updates to the slideshow. Okay, let's see.
Great, looks good.
All right.
I'm Dan Dalton, as I said. I'm with Pasa Sustainable Agriculture in Pennsylvania. I split my time between administering the vegetable apprenticeship program and running programming and outreach in the western third of the state. So it's a little bit of both of those things. And we try to integrate as much as possible our farmer to farmer exchange opportunities, workshops, webinars, and our annual conference into our apprenticeship program when possible. So we are both industry sponsor and the education provider that was registered with our apprenticeship with the state, because we do both of those activities. We are not the end all be all though for training opportunities. We partner as much as we can with outside entities and try to recognize whenever and however possible outside trainings from Extension, other nonprofits, and peer organizations. As long as they're providing relevant and credible trainings, we're happy to recognize that. So it's a little bit of a wrinkle that is a little bit different for us than some of the other programs. I decided just to give a little breakdown here of the program at a glance, just to give you a sense for comparison. Our program runs generally around 18 months. That can be, if somebody's working full time, that can be about a straight run 1.5 years. Or it can be broken up into 2 9 to 10 month seasons with a winter or some kind of gap built in there. Ours is registered with the state as 3,000 hours, with 90% of that, 2,784 hours, being on the job training and the balance, the 216 as related technical instruction. We try again to qualify as many things as RTI as possible. So we try to create fora for peer discussion groups, farm tours, especially between apprenticing farms for folks to get out and see each other's operations. On the farm, lunch chats, things like that. Some of our farms are really diligent and very good about, just having good, meaningful, in-depth conversations over lunch or as a part of their staff meetings. And as long as our apprentices are tracking that, we try to recognize that as at least some fraction of their RTI. And then creating networking opportunities at our conference and at our events and things like that. We have a program minimum of $8 an hour. Our state minimum wage, I think, is $7.20, $7.25, something like that. I think I believe all of our farms are well above that minimum, especially when you take in kind compensation, housing, food, and other things into the mix. But we have a wage minimum of $8. Again, pay raises with adequate progress, which is this part of the industry standard. We've had over 300 inquiries and outreaches from potential apprentices over the last 2.5 years. We currently have 27 pre-approved active farms, and we've got apprentices and farmers matched up and placed on 9 of those across the state. And we will be graduating our first cohort of apprentices this fall, likely 3 this fall and 1 next spring. So that's sort of where we're at. Our lineage, I like to point out, is sort of a hybrid. We took a lot from DGA. Our education director saw a lot of value in DGA and wanted to use it as much as possible as a model to develop a vegetable apprenticeship for our state. So I collaborate with Aaron DeLong a lot, our DGA representative, to get his feedback and insights about what we can use and how we can use it. And then we also got a lot of feedback and a lot of insight from the Wisconsin Organic Vegetable Managers Apprenticeship. I think I got that right, more or less. And they were very helpful to us too. And we had a really nice dialogue over the last several years too, as we were sort of working in parallel. Sort of to Marisa's point about outcomes, we're not looking necessarily to only create owner operators. We're also looking to create professional farm managers in the future as well, and to help connect our graduates with those professional management opportunities, as well as creating, more informed and more grounded technical service providers and things like that, for somebody who doesn't necessarily want to go into farming immediately, but if they want to be in the technical service space, that they have a well-rounded and well-grounded training. And then for us, the last thing is just we are working on sort of extending the pipeline as we think about it for our program, with us, the apprenticeship being kind of in the middle. The only thing that we have rejected any apprentice inquiry for is a lack of experience. We have a 1-year minimum of production farming experience to participate. And so we're trying to create a pre-apprenticeship program to help give people an opportunity to access that 1 year of training equivalent. And then we're also trying to build in some of those post-apprenticeship supports, so journey worker supports and mentorship for people who are graduating from the program, that we can continue to be a positive and helpful influence on them as they pursue their career in agriculture. So yeah, I'll happy to entertain any questions as we go along, but that's our program in brief.
Great, thank you, Dan. And I think last but not least, we have Fair Share CSA Coalition and the University of Wisconsin.
So there are 2 of us on the line that I want to introduce before I talk a little bit about the program. I am one of those people. I'm Claire Strader. I'm the organic vegetable educator for both Fair Share CSA Coalition and University of Wisconsin Extension in Dane County. And it's one position shared by those 2 organizations. And then the other person is Julie Dawson. I'll let her.
I am Julie Dawson. I'm in the Department of Horticulture at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And Claire and I worked together on this, with Claire taking a lot of the lead. So,
well, Julie and I work together a lot, and I think that we have complementary strengths. So that has worked very well for us. Julie is definitely more in the academic area, and has certainly her lead was on the related instruction with this apprenticeship, which I'll talk about in a second. And I have a background as a farmer. I was an organic vegetable farmer for about 20 years. And so that's more kind of the way we work together. Is my side is more of the farmer side and Julie's side is the academic side for a lot of the things that we do together. So our goals for this apprenticeship are listed on the slide, and much like Marisa was saying earlier, we were, I think Julie and I kind of entered this process thinking about it as a way to proliferate organic vegetable farmers, and that's certainly still something that I am interested in, at least, to speak for myself, that I think that that's a good thing. The farmers who were involved in it certainly had a little bit a more nuanced view of it. While it's good to have more diverse people growing vegetables in Wisconsin, organic vegetables in Wisconsin, there's also the element of competition among those farmers within a market that is sometimes growing, that is often growing, but sometimes is a little bit harder to access. And so, especially when you're in close geographic proximity. And so we definitely, based on the feedback of the farmers who were part of the stakeholder group that were designing this apprenticeship, we definitely shifted to be an organic vegetable farm manager apprenticeship, rather, so that we're trying to build longer term, stable, skilled employees on farms rather than that goal of proliferating farms. And so the reason that the farmers were interested in participating in these stakeholder meetings is because they wanted to be able to attract more skilled candidates to their farms to be workers there over hopefully more than 1 year. Because on vegetable farms, there's often this setup where people come and work on the farm for the summer, and then they are not working on the farm in the winter, as you can't grow food in Wisconsin in the winter unless you're working in hoop houses, and you don't need as many people for that. And so there's often workers will be leaving a farm for the winter. And so so the farms are in this cycle of having to rehire people every year. And so we wanted to be able to attract good candidates to those positions and also hopefully retain those skilled employees over a number of seasons. The farmers were also really interested in being able to collaborate with each other as trainers and teachers on those farms, and having this structure of the skills that are supposed to be transferred to the employees, having that structure and also collaboration among those farmers doing that work was something that they were really attracted to. Ideally, as farmers are retiring and potentially wanting to pass their farms on, the examples of farm succession and organic vegetables in our area of it going from parents to children are fairly rare. And so, in vegetables anyway. And so we hopefully in the future could see this apprenticeship as a way to work on farm succession from skilled land owning farmers to their skilled invested workers who are interested in carrying on that business in the future. And we're serving diversified organic vegetable farms, selling to local markets. So they're all pretty small, and meaning like a few acres to 50 acres. And they are all certified organic. And that was one of the things that the farmer stakeholders went around about, on that, whether that was going to be a requirement for the farms that were doing the apprenticeship, teaching apprentices, and they settled on that. Yes, they did want to have the organic certification as an important piece of it. Can you move to the next slide? So here are the basics of the program. It's Wisconsin's first competency-based program. There are 3 types of apprenticeship that are available in Wisconsin. One is purely hours-based. So if you work X number of hours, then you graduate from the program. One is purely competency-based, where you achieve the competencies in the skills laid out in the manual. And once you achieve that, you can graduate from the program. And then the third is a hybrid. It's a combination of a minimum number of hours and also reaching competencies. And the farmers in this stakeholder group decided that the competency-based one is the one that they wanted to use. As I said, it's the first competency-based program in Wisconsin, and that has introduced some wrinkles for us in the things like hours tracking is something that the Department of Ag the Department of Workforce Development rather is used to having these templates where people are entering their hours, and that is a lot less relevant. That's not relevant in a competency-based program. So we're working out some of those things still. The estimated length of the program, because there is not a certain number of hours that are required, is 2,500, and that's usually over 2 growing seasons. That's not required, obviously. But that's how the farmers kind of came on that number, is like that's generally what they were employing people for over 2 seasons. As you've heard from other presenters, there's a combination of on-the-job training with the farmer, and also in Wisconsin, it's called paid related instruction. It's called paid related instruction because the apprentices are paid for that time, both on the job and in the classroom, and it is the farmer's responsibility to pay for that instruction. That happens off the farm, and all of that instruction in our case is happening through the Wisconsin Technical College system. We really liked the idea of including other things, like you've heard other presenters like DGA having field walks and having more informal gatherings where there's a learning exchange or attendance at conferences, that kind of thing, as part of the related instruction for this program. But because of the way we went through the registration with Wisconsin and the people who were involved in that from the Department of Labor, that was not something that is part of our program. It's possible that could adjust and evolve over time. So the farmers pay the wages and for the paid related, the time for that apprentice taking the paid related instruction, but the apprentices themselves are responsible for the tuition, books, and fees through the Wisconsin Technical College system. That's about $600. They're also, that just, the apprentice has to be working 32 hours a week in order to be considered in active status. So if you bring someone on in April or March for 20 hours a week, that does not count as their time in the apprenticeship, technically. FairShare is the sponsor organization for the apprenticeship. It's called FairShare CSA Coalition, and FairShare has for 3 decades now interviewed and endorsed farms that are distributing their products through CSA. And so there's a vetting system that's, as I said, long established with the organization. And as we were going through the details of this apprenticeship design with the farmer stakeholders, they wanted to have a requirement for the farms, for the farmer educator, that they had to be in business and doing active vegetable growing on their own operations for at least 5 years. And this was another area where, with the Department of Workforce Development, they said that that is not a requirement that they would do. They would not make that a requirement for the farms that wanted to take on apprentices. The most that they would do is 1 year. And so the stakeholders decided it would be a good idea to have another organization involved, like FairShare, that could have some more rigorous qualifications for those farmers who would be taking on apprentices. That has not been an issue yet. And we'll see how, if that becomes an issue in the future, but that's part of why FairShare is in the mix there. Our first apprentices started in 2019 and will graduate in 2020. There are 3 on farms in Wisconsin right now, and they started their first round of classes through the technical college system in October. So they should be finishing those sometime this winter and will be graduating. And I think that's all I have. I would love if Julie's got anything to add to that. That would be great.
Oh, that was great. Yeah.
All right. So thank you to all of our panelists for giving a quick intro to your programs and why you're here. So at this point, we're going to go through some facilitated Q&A to hear from all of our panelists a little bit more about some of the benefits and drawbacks and challenges and successes of running a registered apprenticeship program. So just to start out, sort of cutting straight to the chase, why should someone or some organization register their apprenticeship program as opposed to just staying as an informal or lowercase a? What are some of the benefits, and why did your program decide to register?
I think for us, at least, it gives you some amount of cover and flexibility as far as the uniqueness of a farmer training labor arrangement. I think that in Pennsylvania, there have been some people, they're starting to crack down on some of the more informal and really loose and unfair at times, and really unfair and exploitative arrangements that folks have gotten themselves into over the last 15 or 20 years in search of a farmer training opportunity. So it gives us a backstop. It gives us a standard to set. We set a standard, and then we have to live up to that and deliver on that. And it's it just holds us accountable and holds our farmers and folks accountable, and it creates a more fair exchange in this whole space.
And Dan, I'll totally ditto all of that. That's a big reason why we did it in California. In 2008, the Labor Department came down on all these informal apprenticeships and farms that were doing them, and lots of fines happened. A few farms had to shut down. So, registered apprenticeship became one of the few pathways that, folks interested in becoming farmers or training had access to on-farm training. So that's why we also went that route. It also created credibility with larger scale, more established farms who had never been exposed to this, concept before or model. And then we also were able to get access to state funding for apprenticeship tuition, which I mentioned before, another workforce development training and support, both statewide and federal. So, and like you said, it's a proven model in the trades, and it's, it ensures that our farmers are following state labor laws and that wages increases are happening, and it provides a credential that folks can use in the industry. So, and it provides a standard of training. So when someone shows, a future employer their journey worker card, they can be sure that they have a set of skills that is standardized. It's not just whatever they happen to learn on the farm. It's actually a very strict set of skills.
Yeah, I think we were hearing a lot of the same things. And one of the benefits of the registered apprenticeship is that journey worker status. And so the hope is that, and we've had a few conversations with local lenders, and it would be easier for someone to establish themselves if they wanted to afterwards independently, access to loans or other capital. And it's also easier for farmers who want to hire a manager to know that that person has the skills needed for the management position without having to kind of take a leap of faith and then hope that it works out over the season. So there are a number of established farms that do want to hire management level positions. And this was attractive for them, either to train their own apprentice to then hire as the manager, or to hire somebody that came out of a formal apprenticeship program with a known set of skills, just like you were saying, Marisa. I think we did hear some about kind of the benefits of having kind of legal protection on both sides. The state contract can be a little burdensome sometimes, but it also provides protection to both parties if there is an issue. And so, making sure that farmers the farmers want to make sure they're treating their employees well. And then the apprentices also, when they're getting into a situation like the apprenticeship, they know that they have certain protections. So that also was kind of in conversations we had with the farmers. And I don't know, Claire, if you want to chime in, I'm probably missing something. I think also like apprenticeship is very well recognized in Wisconsin. And so the technical college system is set up to handle it and to provide instruction at a very low cost. I mean, $600 isn't nothing, but compared to what you would pay at a 2-year or 4-year college, the courses are actually designed specifically for the apprenticeship program. And so it's really tailored to what needs to be learned in the classroom versus on the job. And the farmers that developed our apprenticeship sorted the tasks into things that they would prefer to have taught at the technical college system, and that they would prefer to have, their own kind of instruction on farm. And so tapping into the Wisconsin network that supports apprenticeship has brought some resources. It brings some level of bureaucracy, but it also does bring quite a bit of support to the program.
Claire, were you going to add something else? Okay.
Sorry, looking for my mute. Nope, that was great.
Okay. So it sounds like, hearing from all of you, the, consistency and, having some standards around, compensation and legal protection, that's one of the benefits for organizations that sort of extends to both the farmers and ranchers and apprentices participating in the program, also extends to the whole industry. What's in it for the employers or mentors who are in your program?
I'll speak for DGA. As I said in my introduction, many of our master dairy grazers and our master dairy grazers have a minimum requirement of 5 years grazing experience, or they have to have graduated from DGA and have an additional 3 years of grazing experience before they can become a master dairy grazer. And our education coordinators bring those assessments to our NATC committee to be approved for those master dairy grazers. And what's in it for them? Many of ours, let's face it, some of them are looking for help. They want employees, they want staff. It's hard to find sometimes people who are interested in milking cows and learning about a dairy. They also have a belief in the principles of grazing and want to pass that on. Now, benefit monetarily, for us, we are fortunate to partner with Organic Valley here in Wisconsin. And so any of our master dairy grazers who are Organic Valley farmers, sell to Organic Valley, we do have a program that offers them master training credits. So over the 2-year period, they can ask for reimbursements depending on the status of their apprentice and where they are at in the program. And that can be up to almost $8,000 over the 2 years. So, and we're always looking for grants and other opportunities for us to offer our master dairy grazers stipends of some kind to help them with paying their apprentices. Because we are federally registered, I know some of the others mentioned the ones that are registered in Wisconsin and maybe other states too, the apprentices have to be paid for their related instruction time. If you're federally registered, that is not a requirement. So now that we're looking at going back and registering with some of the states, that will be a requirement. So we will be needing to ask our master farmers to pay for that time, and they haven't been paying that in the past. So that could potentially be a hard sell. We'll just have to see how it goes. And we will continue to look for opportunities to help them monetarily with those costs.
For DVA, following on that, we also seek to find as much subsidy support as we can through grants and whatnot for our farmers. We don't advertise that as a benefit of our program so that they just kind of get a check every once in a while and has DVA in the memo, and they appreciate that. But we try not to use the subsidy as a selling point. But for us in the development of the program, we had a lot of conversations with our farmers about where the sort of break-even point was as far as training a person versus getting the value back from the training. And it was pretty much universally 18 months was the answer from almost everyone. About partway through their second season was where they started to feel that the investment in the person was sort of netting out positive for them, which is how we arrived at our 18-month figure, and then we kind of worked that back to the hours. The other thing that they wanted us to do was to extend the reach of their promotion for their opportunities to work at their farms. So they wanted to be able to maybe access someone across the state or even outside, within the region who didn't know about them and wasn't being reached by their current job promotions. And then creating the 1-year experience requirement was the other thing. They don't expect people to be even moderately versed in farming, but they want people to know what they're looking at when they step onto the farm. They want to know that they have a reasonable sense of safety and have a decent sense of where to start when they step onto the farmstead. So those are the kind of standards we try to maintain in pre-vetting and then helping to amplify and promote the farms.
I can talk about, in California, there's actually a major labor shortage here on farms, and employee retention is also a really big problem. And then farm managers are also retiring faster, if or just as fast, if not faster than farmers. And so all of these three things are things we're trying to address by helping farmers, like Dan was saying. We are also helping them recruit qualified applicants and doing all the filtering for them for those job openings on their farm. We're also, by committing for 2 years, I think it also helps them have a little bit more confidence that this person's going to stay. And we explain that to the apprentice, that this is really, at the outset, we explain that this is really an investment the farmer's making in you. And, you really need to make sure this is something you want to commit to for a while, beyond the 2 years, ideally. And so I think that filtering part has also been really helpful. Because there's a lot of folks who think they want to be in farming and end up realizing it's not really for them. And so we try to do as good a job as we can of filtering those folks out. You don't necessarily have to have experience to work on our farms, but you have to show other qualities. So transferable skills is a really big one. Maturity level, you have to have experience in the workforce somewhere, but transferable skills are a really big one. Something that you can kind of hit the ground running on the farm, and the farmer will be benefiting from immediately, is something that we're really looking for. And whether that's management experience or carpentry or mechanics, oftentimes it's we've seen with veterans, it also is a great population to work with, because oftentimes they have had some sort of transferable skill that they've developed in the military, and they seem to fit really well on our farms. So I will also say that it has been a challenge to recruit farmers into our program. And I think what will benefit them, they don't recognize this yet. Like, this isn't a very popular model for most farms in California, apprenticeship, and at least formal registered apprenticeship. And so we're doing a lot of work right now trying to reach farmers across the state to kind of present them with this concept and get them to try it out. Yeah.
Great.
I think the one thing I'd love to add to that for the Wisconsin vegetable one is that I agree that the farmers, like Angie was saying, the farmers want to be passing on those skills. And that's a lot of how the farmers in this area learned to farm, was by working on other farms and being in informal apprenticeships. And so they're interested in passing on those skills. They also, and like your program, Marisa, the farmers can register a current employee on their farms. And I've seen a few of the farmers contact me when they have an employee that they would like to retain. And then they say to that employee, you could take this next step and we can get you registered with this apprenticeship. And that is a way to attract that employee to return to the farm for 2 more years. So that did not, there were a few farms that contacted me about that this year, and those did not work out because of COVID. At least I think it's because of COVID, because they got so distracted by all these other things that they had to do around personal protective equipment and all the new sanitation procedures. And so both the apprentices that were interested in that and the farmers who were trying to register those apprentices got distracted. But I thought that was pretty interesting, of like, come back to my farm and I will give you this enhanced level of training.
I guess I would like to add too, similar to what Marisa was saying about having apprentices who are prepared. We also don't require that our apprentice candidates have any dairy farming experience per se. Some of our dairy grazers prefer that. They would like them to come in with no experience so they can train them, you know, the way they would like them to be. But we also offer, and I don't think I mentioned this, an internship program. So we do have a 3-month internship. It can be anywhere from 200 to 480 hours, which has been really beneficial in introducing dairy farming, especially to the apprentice candidates who don't have any experience in that. Also, like Marisa said, they think they like cows and they think they want to be on a dairy farm, but you know, it's a lot of work and it's dirty work, and you're dealing with a lot of things that you probably didn't realize you were going to be dealing with. So it's a nice way to get their foot in the door, see if they really like dairying. And obviously any hours that they accumulate through their internship will transfer to the apprenticeship if they decide to become an apprentice. And the other thing I should have said is the other big benefit that our dairy farmers see is they're getting people who are interested in possibly owning a dairy or taking over a dairy. They're getting people coming to them, which, as we know, many farmers, but especially dairy farmers, are going out and they don't have kids who want to continue the dairy in any way. And so this gives them the opportunity for their potentially lifelong business to continue on with someone else who has an interest. So a lot of our dairy grazers see that as a big benefit.
So we'll come back to some of the challenges that some of you started to talk about a little bit, but before we get into that, could each of you clarify, is your program federally registered, state registered, or dual registered, and why did you choose, you know, one or the other, and what are the sources of funding that are, you know, supporting your program either through the registration or otherwise?
I'll start. So we are currently federally registered. Obviously, Pennsylvania has registered DGA through their state, through Pasa. We are in the process of registering with Wisconsin, which is where we started, which I mentioned, I think, in the beginning. We started just registering with the state, but then when we quickly started taking on partners in other states, it became clear that federally registering was going to be easier for us to manage the program. However, due to some grant opportunities in Wisconsin, we are coming back to Wisconsin to register with them. We're actually in the middle of the process, which has been really easy considering that's where we started. Basically, they helped us develop everything. So everything they need, we pretty much already have. And we're doing that so that we can take advantage of what they have. It's called the Wisconsin Fast Forward Grant Program, and it's for training apprentices. So we are trying to take advantage of that currently, and we are investigating our other partner states to see if there are similar funding opportunities in different states. And another motivation is we're really interested in starting a youth apprenticeship program as part of our overall programming to get into high schools for kids who maybe, you know, don't want to go to college, have grown up on a farm, know that they want to be on a farm. A way for them to transition into the apprenticeship. So currently federally registered, will be registered in the state of Wisconsin again, probably in the next week or so, and then investigating other partner states for opportunities.
Yeah, so DVA is state registered in Pennsylvania. Our approach all along has been to get a state registration and then pursue federal registration in the future. So we have pursued, you know, BFRDP funding and some other opportunities through the years to help accelerate that timeline. Those have not come through to date. So we're taking, you know, if we don't have the extra support and that extra push to do it, we've been taking sort of a slower approach, making sure we have our systems and infrastructure in place so that we're able to actually administer, you know, a federally registered program. We took this step. We were sort of, our admin for a long time was a lot of Google Docs, kind of hashed together using all the extensions. We were sort of taxing the limits of what those systems could do. So we actually commissioned a developer to put together an actual apprenticeship management portal to help with all of the hours tracking and the related instruction tracking and all of that. in anticipation of in the future, you know, as our in-state apprentice numbers increase, and then hopefully as federal national registration comes online, we'll do that. We'll have that available. Support to date has been a lot of state level specialty crop block grants. We've had a couple of those to support specifically the related instruction time. So some advanced topics that qualify for related instruction. And then we have a very generous, several generous foundations in the Pittsburgh area, the Heinz Endowments and the Hillman family, who have supported the development of the program so far to date as an investment in economic revitalization and job opportunity trainings here in Pennsylvania.
Our program is actually state registered. We looked at registering it federally, but it ended up being kind of a nightmare, honestly. And so we decided to just wait on that and develop our program here, you know, wait till it's a little bit bigger and has more success, and then look at that again. In terms of funding, we are similarly to Dan, we've actually been supported quite a bit by the state specialty crop block grants to get us off the ground. We've also been able to access the California Apprenticeship Initiative funding, which is again state funding that's specific to non-traditional apprenticeships starting out, so not the trades, anything other than the trades. And that's a 3-year grant, and we're actually, I think, in our 2nd year of that. And we've also received funding from USDA Enhancing Military Opportunities in Agriculture for Veterans. We've partnered with the Farmer Veteran Coalition, who is the lead on that grant. And that is, I think we're entering into our 3rd year into that grant as well. So we are definitely looking for more funding, you know, looking to access more of that workforce development training statewide. I don't know if going nationally, federally is going to really pull down that much more funding for us. So, but yeah, we'll see. We'll see how that turns out.
So ours is registered with Wisconsin, so state registered. The Department of Workforce Development took the lead on submitting it to the federal registration program, and it's been a kind of slow process for it to get through some of those hoops. So they submitted it with all the paperwork, and then there are some like review steps that have to happen. And I think we're in one of the review steps where they're contacting farmers, and so some of the farmers we work with have been contacted, but we haven't really heard much else about like how many more steps there are, which has been one of the things about the registered apprenticeship program is it's sometimes not very transparent from the outside how all of the approvals work. And I think we're learning a lot this time around, and you know, the Department of Workforce Development has been a great supporter and has, you know, moved things forward, but they kind of know how it works and we don't always get all of the info. But we think it's somewhere in the federal registration process at this point.
I guess I should have said that DGA, when we originally kicked it off, that was through a BFRDP, and we have been supported by that program quite often, actually. And we also have some foundation grants, Brookby Foundation and Otto Bremer grants. So we have kind of a mix of grant funding, always looking for more opportunities, especially in our individual states.
Yeah, in terms of our funding, I didn't answer that part of the question. We had a specialty crop block grant that Clara got, and then we have had support from DWD, the Department of Workforce Development, in terms of staff time. They have put quite a bit of staff time into this. We've applied for a number of different grants like the BFRDP and some SARE professional development grants and haven't been successful. I have had a few students that have done public practice master's degree in the agroecology program at UW-Madison. And so we've been able to support them in the summer or, you know, very part-time through the academic year while they do their academic work. That's funded basically by their interest in the project and their interest in spending time on the project and their willingness to do a TA to actually, a teaching assistantship to actually pay for their schooling. So we've had 3 students that have been on teaching assistantships and that have used their project time for support of the apprenticeship program.
A few of you have mentioned recruitment as a challenge. So I'd love to hear a little bit about what are some of the challenges that you're experiencing in regards to recruitment of either mentors in the program or apprentices.
We have had trouble with geographic distribution. It's a very, I think, deceptively large state side to side, and there's some regional variability. So last year, for instance, we had a dozen folks seeking an urban farming apprenticeship or an urban type setting. And our only urban farm was in Philadelphia, which is the opposite side of the state, which might as well be the opposite side of the country for most folks. So, you know, cultivating an urban farm in Western PA became a priority, that sort of thing. The other is trying to make sure that the farmer profiles are attractive to apprentices. Sometimes they put in little hot button keywords to try and make sure that people are serious about farming with them. So making matches can be a little challenging in that way. Sorry, I guess that's a little bit off of the question, but we actually tried to use our program development as part of our recruitment strategy. So we tried to take the core of the 20 or so farmers who helped us develop the program, and then the 30 additional folks who helped to validate our curriculum. We're in sort of a target 50 of folks that we really wanted to be a part of the program as we got started. And then that has borne out pretty well, that a lot of those became the early adopters. And then we were able to recruit people adjacent to them in over time. But at some point, we're going to sort of top out on that. And we need to, you know, diversify in terms of scale. We're pretty thin as far as the scale that we're addressing right now. And like I said, we're trying to always expand the geography that we're addressing so that folks have those opportunities close to them and are able to connect.
I guess I would say for recruitment for DGA, we actually are not currently actively doing outreach for recruitment for apprenticeship candidates. We have, as I said, 180 currently who are not matched on a farm. And I mean, some of our issues are just the general dairy economy. You know, there's a limited amount of dairy farms as it is. And then of those dairy farms, there's a limited amount of how many of those farmers are implementing managed grazing of any kind. So we have a limited number of farms that are set up to take on an apprentice. So I would say that if we could get more expert dairy grazers willing to take on an apprentice, we certainly have plenty that are willing. Although on the flip side of that, we have received feedback from some of our master grazers that the quality of the candidates is not always there. And often we have candidates sign up on the website and act really interested. And then when our farmers contact them for an interview or to come to the farm, they just have disappeared. There's no response. We don't know where they are. We don't know if they're still interested. So it can go both ways. But I would say the dairy economy is tough on the process overall.
Can address that from the Wisconsin vegetable program. So similar to what Dan was saying, we were thinking that the farmers that were involved in the development of the program would be the people who were initially offering apprenticeship positions rather, and that has not totally worked out. I mean, that is true for, there are one of the farms who has apprentices was in the development, but a number of the other farms have switched. So one switched from vegetables to apples, one has gone out of farming altogether, etc. You know, there are various issues that have happened there. I think that the ones that are still farming vegetables are still interested in taking on apprentices. And but I think that, you know, some of the issue that we have with recruiting farmers is that they do see it as an additional demand on them. And so like Dan was talking about, like, where's the cost benefit on the investment in the additional training versus like getting that higher level of skill, that higher level of management ability from that employee is something that we have not quantified. And so they're like doing those quantifications maybe in their heads as they're thinking about this employee moving into an apprenticeship position. And so I'm wondering if it is, like I said earlier, more of a retention tool. So for those farmers, so I think that is where they might then feel like it's worth it, because they already have it's like, is this person prepared? Do they have any vegetable experience? Do they know what it's like to be on a farm? All these things you all have talked about, but then there are also those personality issues, right? So this is maybe a great candidate, but maybe they don't, like, we don't get along for whatever reason, whatever our styles are not perfectly in sync. And so having that experience of being in that employment relationship for a year on that specific farm before moving into an apprenticeship can be really valuable. So, and then on the apprentice side for recruitment, that has been Julie's students, frankly, have done a lot of that outreach, being of more of the age range of the people who might be interested in those apprenticeships. And so we've gotten in a number of applications. We take the applications through the website, and similar to what Angie is saying, like, I will reach back out to those people, ask them to submit a cover letter and a brief resume, nothing fancy, just something so the farmers can gauge what their experience is. And then we have a Google folder basically with that information that gets shared with the farms that have been registered with Wisconsin. And actually I should know that number off the top of my head, but I don't. It's fewer than 10, but close to 10. So not a huge number. And I will, regularly get phone calls from a few of those farmers saying, who's in that pool? When are you going to get new applications in? I'm interested in interviewing people now so that we can get set up for that following season. So it is an interesting mix of like people who are really wanting to find someone to work on their farms, people who are interested in retaining workers on their farms by entering them in that program, and then potential apprentices who it's like very difficult to tell their level of interest and commitment to the program, especially when, this is something, because it's online, that can be accessed nationally. And so are people really going to move to Wisconsin for this? Rare. That's going to be pretty rare.
And I will say that, I'm sure this is probably the case for everyone. COVID obviously has put a huge damper on not only recruitment and potential candidates being able to travel to another state that they may want to be in and visit a farm. And it really is why we've just kind of not really been recruiting right now. It's just been too difficult. And with us being involved in multiple states, every state having their own regulations around COVID, and frankly, it's made it really difficult for our education coordinators in our states to stay connected to their master pairs. Like Claire was alluding to, these relationships between these mentors and these apprentices, it's a delicate balance of really nurturing those relationships, and that nurturing is really difficult to do over a Zoom call, especially when many farms don't have internet that is conducive to that, or not tech savvy farmers, trying to get on there and have a Zoom call. So COVID has really put a damper on that topic for sure.
I think for the Center for Land-Based Learning, our program, we've probably had about 400 folks apply to our program over the last 4 years, and probably 200 of those happened in the last year. And I think similarly to Angie, like, we've actually stopped kind of promoting the program to applicants just because we have so many, and the bottleneck for us really is the farmers. And so we've actually hired an outreach coordinator this last year just to do recruitment. And that made a huge difference, just having someone who's just full-time dedicated to recruiting farmers. COVID actually helped us, oddly, recruit farmers because of the ability to go statewide with our programs. So because our classes were no longer place-based, we could have them online, and that actually allowed farmers from all over the state to participate in the program where they could hire someone near them, and then the classes could be done online anywhere. So that's expanded our program quite a bit, and it is kind of odd that ended up being beneficial to us. But I will also say, we have about 20 folks who have actually gotten into our pool from like 260 that applied just in the last 12 months. So we have a very, pretty hard filtering process, like I said. And I think another thing, something that's really helped us with recruiting farmers is, reaching out to our just statewide support organizations. So the Farm Bureau, Natural Resources Conservation Services, farm service agencies, all of our ag commissioners that we've reached out to have been incredibly supportive. They actually mailed our flyer out with like county-wide, just like our Yolo County Ag Commissioner mailed out our flyer to 500 farmers along with their pesticide renewal certificates just to advertise the program for us. So that's been really helpful. And then we've actually figured out that it actually costs a lot of money to market and advertise to farmers. So we've budgeted about $10,000 to $15,000 just on marketing, paying for ads in the AgALN, the local newspapers, going to conferences and expos virtually this year, unfortunately, but doing those booths and, doing advertisements through other digital media that reaches farmers has been something we've had to try. And I think it's starting to work. Facebook ads, Google ads, like learning all these things. Having an outreach coordinator has been really helpful to learn all these marketing tactics.
Got one more thing to add to recruitment on the farmer side, which I should have mentioned earlier, is like I think that we're sort of taking a back door to that as well, thinking about like you all have talked about labor being an issue on farms, and the farms are having a hard time finding qualified labor for their farms, and that's part of why the apprenticeship was started. And so we are also working on teaching farmers to be better employers, and I don't mean like offering certain wages and offering like benefits, like those things are certainly discussed, but rather I think what I actually mean is being better trainers, because whether or not you're training an apprentice, you have, as a farmer, you have people working on your farm. And so if you are a good trainer, your farm is way better and way easier for everyone when you like taken time to think about what is your farm culture. Is that the farm culture you want to have, or is that something that you can have an effect on by making a few changes? And so I'm hoping that as those classes or those workshops start to happen and farmers become more skilled trainers, that it will be an easier step into the apprenticeship, and perhaps even have, whether or not they participate in the apprenticeship, they will have increased retention of their employees because the employees are more satisfied and happier on those farms, again, whether or not they're part of the formal apprenticeship, because that is a big part of why we started walking down that road, is serving helping fill those labor demands on those farms.
Great. Yeah, I know that I think a lot of our programs are trying to change some of the culture around employment and training and hiring in agriculture.
Yeah, we put on a full day kind of, we targeted 3 different topics in onboarding and better HR practices this last spring. And it was incredible to see the variety and the texture among folks, even who are fairly similarly in terms of their farm development. Some of them were way out on the one end doing really in-depth, intensive trainings, and some were just like throw you in kind of thing and see if you survive. And so trying to raise the level of training in general, I think is something that we're trying to support folks to do. One other thing that it sparked me from the previous topic about matching folks up, you know, when we were using that Google Docs system, we were sharing out a PDF of people's profiles, lightly anonymized, so that folks were able to make kind of a more, I don't know, just a less biased decision, I guess, I don't know. We were finding that only the first 2 to 5 candidates were actually getting reviewed within that document because it was so long. And so we ended up doing the switching. We used their ID numbers and randomized them with every time we shared it out. So we would share it out weekly or bi-weekly, depending on the time of year, and would randomize it. We found that really smoothed out how people were getting reviewed, because it was always changing and something new was always at the top. In our current system, where we have the web portal, you know, people have a profile, kind of a page within there. And we have found similarly that people who have an icon photo, even if it's just a stock image of a piece of broccoli or whatever, that those get a lot more traction than the ones that have the gray, you know, outline of a person. And so again, from a best practices standpoint, and that goes for both farms and apprentices. So trying to encourage folks to choose something to convey any kind of idea about themselves or their farm, and that has increased traction there.
We have something similar on our website, Dan, where if we have a farm who's serious about hiring, actively looking for an apprentice, we have a featured farm section on our website where they can post pictures of their farm or their family, their animals, you know, and anytime an apprentice can see what the farm looks like, that's a real attractant.
So we have just about 8 minutes left here. I do want to point out that Jennifer Hashley from Tufts New Entry posted a link in the chat to a brand new mentor training toolkit that was collaborative effort that was put together by a number of programs. So that's a really great resource to check out. I'm curious if anyone in the audience has a question that they'd like to see answered before we wrap up. And I see someone just turned their camera on. Great.
I definitely have a question. I'm doing some research on apprenticeships and especially registered apprenticeships that market to military veterans. And I'm wondering if any of your organizations have been successful in using some of the VA education benefits or on-the-job training benefits within your programs.
Yes, sorry, Marisa, do you want to go first?
Yeah, no, go ahead, you can go.
We do have a USDA Ag Vets grant that we use for our ag program. I will say that after at least a full year of partnering with Farmer Veteran Coalition and doing our own outreach to veterans, we only have 2 veterans active in our program right now. The recruitment, for whatever reason, does not seem to be working, or maybe not many veterans are interested in milking dairy cows. But we do have 2 veterans, and one of those veterans is using his GI Bill benefits toward the program.
Yeah, and we also have an AgVets grant where the Farmer Veteran Coalition is the main lead. And that's been hugely helpful in terms of just lessons. Like, we're learning a lot about how to recruit veterans. And like Angie said, you know, we haven't had a ton of success. The 2 veterans who are graduating today are the only 2 that we've had in the program so far. And I think one thing that's been interesting is that they ended up at the same farm, even though they didn't know each other. And I think having them together at the same farm to provide support to one another has been something that's been very, very helpful for them. Both of them have accessed VA benefits separately. One is already participating in voc rehab, and that has been huge. That program has helped him a ton. It's provided the monthly BHA. It's also provided him with a counselor that he talks to regularly. And in fact, as he's figured out what his career is going to look like after the apprenticeship program, the voc rehab is now going to actually fund him to continue with his bachelor's degree and provide like a living stipend. So he doesn't actually have to work while he's going to school. He's going to take the next few years and go to school, finish his degree, and also start a farm on his own. And that he couldn't have done that without voc rehab. And then the other one has been able to access their 9/11 GI Bill. And that has also provided a basic housing allowance that has supplemented his wages as an apprentice, which I think also has been huge. I mean, minimum wage in California is $13 an hour, which I know is higher than everywhere else, but it's still not that much because our cost of living is so high. And so most farms start out at 14 or more. These guys are probably making around $15.50 at this point, but it's still not very much, especially when you have a family to support, which both of them do. So that BHA has been really helpful.
We have had two folks find us and just go through our normal process, and I have not applied any of their VA benefits to the apprenticeship experience or anything so far. We did have a third person who pursued us and wanted to really operationalize all of the benefits in various ways to support the features of the apprenticeship, and really started too late in the process. So we're realizing that for somebody who does want to maximize those benefits in applying them to the apprenticeship, that we need to have a longer timeline that starts earlier to make sure that everything's in place, especially for the first few, as we're going, figuring out all of the paperwork and the textures and whatnot. I'm not sure how well integrated the other states are, but in Pennsylvania, everything is splintered across all the various departments. And there always seems to be someone in another department who's holding the keys to your, education holds the thing for labor and industry and vice versa. And it's like, it's a sort of labyrinth that we are still working to break through successfully for any of our folks. So that's where we're at to date.
I'll just quickly say that I think it's important, Sarah, for you to know that registered apprenticeships they have to go through a separate process to register with the VA as an approved training program. And so that's a really important thing to try to do in order for veterans to access those benefits.
Great. So I think we may have time for one more quick question, or if any of the panelists have any other sort of quick nugget that you wanted to share before we wrap things up.
I put a plug in for this network. I mean, every year I feel like I come back and get more, and we get deeper into it every time. So it's what keeps me coming back, and it's been really helpful as far as troubleshooting different issues and finding joint funding, or at least pursuing it together, and best practices and resources. So definitely appreciate that.
Yeah, and I'll put the link to the Ag Apprenticeship Learning Network, now combined with the incubator farm programs known together as the Field Network, in the chat. So yeah, definitely second that.
I guess I thought about one thing really quickly that hasn't come up yet, but one thing that we're also doing to try to make our program more accessible is focusing on farm workers and upskilling current employees as farm workers in order to allow them to go through this program and get the same education and leadership and management training. Because what we've heard from the farmers we've worked with and talked to is that often they have these current employees who they identified have been on the farm for a very long time, but just need a little bit more education and training to move up into a managerial role and position. So we're actually focusing on that, and we're working with folks to develop a bilingual curriculum so that they have access to that as well. And the leadership and management training that we're also trying to do will also be bilingual.
Great. All right, so we're at the hour and a half mark. So I think we'll wrap things up here, but if any of the panelists, if you want to put your contact info into the chat will be available with the recording. So whether there's folks who are on the call today who may want to follow up with any questions, or folks who see the recording in the future. Yeah, just thank you everyone for sharing your experience and your expertise and making yourself available on a Sunday morning or afternoon, depending on where you are.
Thank
Thank you guys. This was great. I learned a lot. Appreciate your sharing too. So, and thank you, Leah, for hosting this as well. So,
Yeah, of course.
yeah, look forward to sharing out your wisdom with everybody else too.
Thanks,
All right.
everyone.
Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
Bye.